I've always been the kind of guy who tries to keep his head down and do good work. Growing up in a small town in the Midwest, my parents instilled in me the value of hard work and integrity. My dad was a high school teacher, and my mom ran a small bakery. They weren't rich, but they taught me that success comes from putting in the effort and being honest. I carried those values with me when I moved to San Francisco 3 years ago to join a promising tech startup. It was a big leap for me, leaving behind everything I knew for a city that felt like it was on a different planet. But I was excited about the opportunity to work on cutting-edge software and be part of something that could really make a difference. The first couple of years at the company were great. I threw myself into my work, often staying late to perfect my code or brainstorm new features. My colleagues became like a second family to me. We'd grab beers after work, have weekend hackathons, and genuinely enjoyed each other's company. I even started dating another developer, Brenda, though we eventually broke up amicably when she took a job in Seattle. Outside of work, I found my niche in the local music scene. I've played guitar since I was a kid, and I set up a small recording studio in my apartment. On weekends, I'd often play at open mic nights or jam with other musicians I met. It was a great way to balance out the intense focus of my day job with something creative and expressive. Everything changed about a year ago when Mark joined our team. From day one, something about him rubbed me the wrong way. He waltzed in like he owned the place, bragging about his previous jobs at big-name tech companies and dropping names of Silicon Valley bigwigs he claimed to know personally. At first, I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was just nervous and overcompensating. I even invited him out for drinks with some of the team, hoping he'd relax and show a different side. But as the weeks went by, it became clear that this was just who Mark was. In team meetings, Mark would dominate the conversation, talking over others and dismissing ideas that weren't his own. He'd find ways to insert himself into projects he wasn't even assigned to, always angling for the most high-profile tasks. What bothered me most was how he'd take credit for other people's work. He had a way of presenting things that made it seem like every good idea had originated with him. I tried to brush it off and focus on my own work. I was in the middle of a big project overhauling our user authentication system, something I was really passionate about. I'd been researching cutting-edge security protocols and had some innovative ideas for making our system both more secure and user-friendly. One day, I was working late, putting the finishing touches on a presentation about my authentication project. Mark strolled by my desk, peering at my screen. "Hey, what are you working on?" he asked casually. I hesitated for a moment, but then thought, why not? Maybe if I shared my excitement about the project, he'd see the value in collaboration rather than competition. So I gave him a quick overview of my ideas. Mark seemed genuinely interested, asking thoughtful questions and even offering a suggestion or two. For the first time, I felt like maybe I'd misjudged him. We ended up talking for over an hour, diving deep into the technical details. When he left, he thanked me for sharing and said he was looking forward to the presentation. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, ready to give my presentation to the team. But as I walked in, I saw Mark already standing at the front of the room, my slides up on the screen. My heart sank as I realized what was happening. Mark was presenting my authentication project as if it was his own idea. He used my slides, my research, even some of the specific phrases I'd used when explaining it to him. The team, including our manager, seemed impressed. They were nodding along, asking questions that Mark deftly answered using the information I'd shared with him. I sat there in shock, unable to process what was happening. Part of me wanted to stand up and call him out right there, but another part was paralyzed. I'd always avoided confrontation, always believed that the truth would speak for itself. But now, watching Mark bask in the praise for my work, I realized that sometimes you have to speak up for yourself. After the meeting, I pulled Mark aside, my heart pounding. "What was that?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "That was my project, my ideas. Why did you present it without even mentioning me?" Mark looked at me with a mixture of surprise and amusement. "Oh, come on," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "We're all on the same team here. No need to be so territorial. Besides, I refined those ideas, made them presentable. You should be thanking me for getting them approved." I was speechless. How could he twist things around like that? Before I could gather my thoughts to respond, he was already walking away, saying over his shoulder, "Great teamwork on this one." Since then, it's only gotten worse. Mark has been consistently taking credit for my ideas in meetings, forgetting to include me on important emails about projects I'm leading, and even trying to assign me busy work so he can swoop in on the high-profile tasks. It's gotten to the point where I dread coming into the office each day. The place that once felt like a second home now feels hostile. I find myself second-guessing everything I do, paranoid about sharing any ideas. It's even affecting my life outside of work. I've been skipping open mic nights, too drained to even pick up my guitar when I get home. I've tried talking to our manager about it, but Mark is really chummy with him. They often grab beers after work and play golf on weekends. So far, my concerns have been brushed off as team dynamics that we need to work out ourselves. I'm starting to wonder if I should just start looking for a new job. But the thought of leaving this company, which I've invested so much of myself in, breaks my heart. Plus, the job market is pretty tough right now, especially for someone at my level trying to move laterally. There's also a part of me that feels like leaving would be letting Mark win. I think about my parents, about the values they instilled in me. They'd want me to stand up for myself, to fight for what's right. But how do you fight against someone who seems to have no moral compass? I'm at a loss for what to do. Has anyone dealt with a coworker like this before? How did you handle it? I don't want to come across as whiny or not a team player, but I also feel like I'm being majorly taken advantage of. Any advice would be appreciated. I've thought about going to HR, but I'm worried about potential backlash. What if they don't believe me? What if Mark finds out and makes my life even more difficult? And even if they do believe me, what can they really do? I've also considered trying to beat Mark at his own game, being more aggressive, more self-promoting. But the thought of becoming like him makes me feel sick. I don't want to compromise who I am just to get ahead. Sometimes I find myself daydreaming about quitting dramatically, calling out Mark in front of the whole office and walking out with my head held high. But then reality sets in, and I remember my rent, my student loans, and the competitive job market. I miss the days when work was exciting, when I felt valued and part of a team. I miss being able to focus on creating great software instead of office politics. I miss feeling proud of what I do. So here I am, turning to strangers on the internet for advice. I know it's a long shot, but I'm hoping someone out there has been through something similar and can offer some wisdom. How do you deal with a coworker who seems hell-bent on taking credit for your work? How do you stand up for yourself without becoming someone you don't like? And how do you know when it's time to cut your losses and move on? Update 1. First off, I want to thank everyone for their advice and support on my last post. It really helped to know I wasn't alone in dealing with this kind of situation. I wanted to give an update on what's been happening with the Mark situation, as things have developed quite a bit in the last few weeks. Taking some of your suggestions, I decided to be more proactive about documenting my work and contributions. I started keeping detailed logs of my projects, saving all email threads, and making sure to vocalize my ideas clearly in meetings. I even started sending follow-up emails after important discussions to summarize what was talked about, making sure my contributions were in writing. I also made an effort to build stronger relationships with other team members. I started going to more company social events, even though it meant less time for my music. I made a point of collaborating more closely with a few colleagues I really respected, hoping they'd back me up if Mark tried to take credit again. At first, this seemed to be working. I felt more confident speaking up in meetings, and a few coworkers even started noticing and commenting on Mark's behavior. There were a couple of times when he tried to claim credit for something, and another team member would speak up and say, "Actually, wasn't that John's idea?" It felt good to have that support. But then things took an unexpected turn. About 2 weeks ago, our company announced a new innovation challenge, basically an internal competition where employees could pitch new product ideas. The winning team would get a substantial bonus and the chance to lead development on their concept. I saw this as the perfect opportunity to showcase my skills without Mark's interference. I could work on something independently, present it myself, and finally get the recognition I deserved. Plus, I had been mulling over an idea for months that I thought could really improve our product. I threw myself into developing the pitch. My idea was for a new feature that would streamline our user onboarding process, using machine learning to personalize the experience for each new user. I worked late nights and weekends, refining every detail. I even used some of my audio production skills to create a slick demo video. The night before submissions were due, I was at the office until midnight, making sure everything was perfect. I saved my files on my personal drive and went home feeling really good about my chances. The next morning, I came into the office early, planning to do one final review before submitting. That's when I saw Mark already there, hunched over his computer. He looked up with this smug grin and said, "Oh hey John, just putting the final touches on my innovation pitch. I think the execs are really going to love it." My stomach dropped. I quickly pulled up the submission portal, and there it was, Mark's entry. As I skimmed through it, my blood ran cold. It was my idea, almost verbatim. He had all my key points, my implementation plan, even a demo video that looked suspiciously like mine with a few tweaks. I confronted him immediately, my hands shaking with anger. "What the hell, Mark? This is my idea. How did you even get access to my files?" Mark just leaned back in his chair, that infuriating smirk still on his face. "Look, it's not personal," he said. "I just saw an opportunity and took it. That's business, kid. Besides, your implementation was amateur hour. I refined it, made it presentable. You should be thanking me." I was speechless. How could he be so brazen? So utterly without shame? Before I could gather my thoughts, he added, "Hey, tell you what. If this wins, I'll make sure you're on the team. Junior developer or something. It'll be good experience for you." I wanted to punch him. I wanted to scream. Instead, I turned and walked straight to our manager's office. I was shaking, but I managed to explain what had happened. I showed him my original files, the access logs that proved I had been working on this for weeks. But as I talked, I could see the doubt in my manager's eyes. He shifted uncomfortably and said, "Look, John, these are serious accusations. Mark came to me earlier this morning, very excited about this project you two had apparently been collaborating on. He mentioned, you might be upset about some last-minute changes he made to improve the pitch. Are you sure you're not just feeling a bit territorial?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Somehow, Mark had managed to get ahead of this, to spin it in his favor before I even knew what was happening. I tried to argue, to make my manager understand, but I could tell he had already made up his mind. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and anger. I could barely focus on my work, constantly checking for updates on the innovation challenge. When the finalists were announced, my fears were confirmed. Mark's "my idea" had made the cut. He'd be presenting to the executive team next week. I'm at a complete loss. I feel betrayed, not just by Mark, but by a system that seems to reward his kind of behavior. Part of me wants to quit on the spot, to walk out and never look back. But another part wants to fight back somehow. I'm considering going over my manager's head to HR, or even higher up the chain. But I'm worried about potential backlash. What if they don't believe me either? What if I get labeled as a troublemaker or not a team player? I've also thought about reaching out to some of the coworkers I've built relationships with, to see if they'd be willing to back me up. But I'm worried about dragging them into this mess. What if supporting me puts their own jobs at risk? There's a part of me that wants to confront Mark again, to tell him I'm not going to let him get away with this. But given how he's manipulated the situation so far, I'm afraid that might just give him more ammunition to use against me. I find myself lying awake at night, replaying everything in my head, wondering if there was something I could have done differently. Should I have been more guarded with my work, less trusting? The values my parents instilled in me, honesty, hard work, integrity, suddenly seem naive in the face of someone like Mark. I haven't been able to touch my guitar or record any music since this happened. The creative spark that used to energize me after a long day of coding is just gone. I feel drained, defeated. Has anyone been in a similar situation? How did you handle it? I'm open to any and all suggestions at this point. I can't let Mark get away with this, but I also don't want to torpedo my own career in the process. How do you fight back against someone who seems to have no moral compass, especially when they've already manipulated the situation in their favor? Update 2. I want to thank everyone again for their support and advice. Your words have been a lifeline during this incredibly stressful time. A lot has happened since my last update, and I'm still processing it all. Taking the advice of many commenters, I decided to go to HR with my concerns about Mark. I spent a whole weekend gathering all the evidence I could, emails, file access logs, my original project files with their creation dates, and even got a couple of co-workers to write statements backing up my side of the story. I was incredibly nervous walking into the HR office on Monday morning. The HR rep, Lisa, listened carefully as I laid out everything that had happened, from the earlier incidents of Mark taking credit for my work to the recent Innovation Challenge fiasco. She seemed genuinely concerned and assured me they would investigate thoroughly. For the next week, I was on edge. Mark seemed oblivious, still swaggering around the office and bragging about his upcoming presentation to the execs. I did my best to avoid him and focus on my work, but it was hard. Every time I saw him, my stomach would clench with anger and anxiety. Then, 2 days before the big presentation, I was called into a meeting with HR, my direct manager, and to my surprise, our CTO. My heart was pounding as I sat down, unsure of what to expect. The CTO spoke first, thanking me for bringing this issue to their attention. It turns out they had done a deep dive into the situation and found overwhelming evidence that Mark had indeed stolen my idea and had a history of taking credit for others' work. They then dropped a bombshell. Mark had been fired, effective immediately. They had confronted him with the evidence, and apparently he'd broken down and admitted to everything. The CTO apologized profusely for letting this go on for so long and assured me that they were implementing new processes to prevent similar situations in the future. I sat there in shock, trying to process what I was hearing. Part of me felt vindicated, relieved that the truth had finally come out. But another part felt almost guilty. Like maybe I had overreacted or caused someone to lose their job. I know that's ridiculous. Mark did this to himself, but it's hard to shake that feeling. Then came another surprise. The CTO asked if I'd be willing to present my original idea to the executive team in Mark's place. They were impressed with the concept and wanted to hear it from the true creator. I agreed, of course, though I was terrified at the prospect of presenting to such high-level executives on such short notice. I spent the next 48 hours in a frenzy, polishing my presentation and practicing my delivery. I barely slept, running on adrenaline and coffee. The day of the presentation arrived, and despite my nerves, it went incredibly well. The executives loved the idea and had tons of thoughtful questions. They seemed genuinely impressed not just with the concept, but with my technical knowledge and passion for the project. At the end, they even hinted that this could lead to a promotion for me. I left that meeting feeling a mix of emotions, elated that my idea had been so well received, proud that I'd stood up for myself, but also exhausted and a bit overwhelmed by everything that had happened. The next few days were a whirlwind. Word spread quickly about Mark's departure and my presentation to the execs. Suddenly, colleagues who had always been friendly but distant were coming up to congratulate me or express their support. A few even shared their own stories of times Mark had taken credit for their work. It was validating, but also made me sad to realize how many people had been affected by his behavior. My manager, who had initially doubted me, came to apologize. He admitted he should have listened to my concerns earlier and promised to be more attentive in the future. I appreciated his apology, but it was hard not to feel a lingering sense of betrayal. As the dust began to settle, I found myself grappling with conflicting emotions. I was relieved that Mark was gone and that the truth had come out. But I was also angry that it had taken so long and that I had to go through so much stress and self-doubt. Part of me wondered if I could truly trust this company again after they had let Mark's behavior go unchecked for so long. There was also a nagging worry about the future. Would people see me differently now? Would they think I was the one who got Mark fired? And how would this affect my relationships with other coworkers, especially those who had been friendly with Mark? I'm trying to focus on the positives. My idea is moving forward into development, and I've been given the lead on the project. It's exciting to see something I created coming to life, and to have the chance to make a real impact on our product. I've also noticed a change in how I carry myself at work. I'm more assertive in meetings, more confident in presenting my ideas. The experience with Mark, as painful as it was, taught me the importance of standing up for myself and my work. But it hasn't all been smooth sailing. There are still moments when I catch myself feeling paranoid, double-checking my work to make sure it's secure or hesitating to share ideas in meetings. I'm working on finding a balance between being cautious and not letting this experience make me overly guarded. Outside of work, I'm slowly getting back into my music. The other night, I picked up my guitar for the first time in weeks and just played for hours. It felt good to lose myself in something creative again, to remember that there's more to my life than just work and office drama. As I move forward, I'm trying to take the lessons from this experience and use them to become not just a better developer, but a better colleague and leader as well. I want to create an environment where everyone feels valued and credited for their contributions. I'm curious to hear from others who have been through similar situations. How did you rebuild trust with your employer after something like this? How do you move forward without becoming overly paranoid or jaded? And for those who have moved into leadership positions after experiencing workplace conflicts, how do you balance being a team player with protecting your own interests? Update 3. It's been about a month since my last update, and I wanted to share how things have progressed since then. The dust has settled a bit, and I'm starting to find my footing in this new reality at work. My idea for the user onboarding improvement has been officially greenlit for development, and I've been promoted to lead the project. It's exciting to see something I created moving forward, but it's also been a huge learning curve. I'm now managing a small team, which comes with its own set of challenges. I find myself constantly thinking about how to be a good leader, how to give credit where it's due, and how to foster a collaborative environment without losing sight of individual contributions. The company has been making efforts to improve the overall work culture. They've implemented new policies around project attribution and have been holding workshops on fostering a more collaborative environment. It's a start, but I know these kinds of changes take time to really take hold. I've been trying to do my part by being transparent about my work process and encouraging open communication within my team. One unexpected development has been my relationship with Sarah, another developer on our team. We've always gotten along well, but in the wake of the Mark situation, we've grown a lot closer. She was one of the co-workers who backed up my story to HR, and since then, we've been grabbing lunch together regularly and even hanging out outside of work. Last week, Sarah confided in me that she had also experienced issues with Mark taking credit for her work, but she had been too intimidated to speak up. We had a long talk about the importance of standing up for ourselves and supporting each other in the workplace. It felt good to connect with someone who really understood what I'd been through. On a personal note, I've been trying to use this experience as a catalyst for growth. I've been more assertive in meetings, more confident in presenting my ideas, and more intentional about building relationships with my coworkers. I've even started mentoring a new junior developer, something I never would have felt qualified to do before. I've also been making a conscious effort to reconnect with my life outside of work. I've started playing open mic nights again, and I'm even thinking about recording some of the songs I wrote during the whole Mark ordeal. It's been therapeutic to channel those emotions into my music, but it hasn't all been smooth sailing. There are still days when I struggle with trust issues at work. I find myself second-guessing people's motives or holding back ideas out of fear they'll be stolen. I'm working on it, but it's a process. I'm also still grappling with some conflicting feelings about the company. While I'm grateful for how they ultimately handled the situation, part of me is still angry that it was allowed to go on for so long. I'm trying to focus on the positive changes and the opportunities I've been given, but there's still a nagging doubt in the back of my mind. As I continue to navigate this new phase of my career, I'm realizing that there's no clear roadmap for situations like this. Every day brings new challenges and opportunities for growth. I'm doing my best to stay true to my values while also protecting myself and my work. I'm still figuring things out, but I'm cautiously optimistic about the future. This experience has been a real wake-up call, both professionally and personally. I'm determined to use it as a stepping stone to become not just a better developer, but a better colleague and leader as well.